Good morning, fourth grade. Welcome to your first day of your study of Stone Facts. I'm sure you're super excited to get started and get to know what this book is all about. I sure am. So impressed with you guys. You're on book number 2 during quarantine, and you're probably going to finish 2 before summer hits. That's super cool. You just have to remember a couple things before we get started. Today, you have to email me for your rubric for your Winn-Dixie book report. And you have to have your notebook or your piece of paper ready to take some notes. We're going to do it a little bit differently today. I'll explain it in a second. And then have a pen or pencil nearby. Have your book if you bought the Stone Facts book, or if you didn't buy the Stone Facts book, no big deal. Just have the links that I posted on my Google site ready to go. Okay, so what's going to happen today is I'm actually going to show you guys for your notes. My boards are starting to get a little yucky. So I just decided I'm just going to show you guys my laptop with the notes. Same exact thing. You can see it perfectly. No big deal. Okay, let's get started. So go ahead and get your note-taking utensils down. I'm going to pick you guys up. Great. And then I'm going to flip and show you the notes. Beautiful. So at the top of your note-taking page, today's day 1 of our study. Our text name is Stone Facts, and the date is 5/18/20. Chapters 1 and 2 we'll read today. So we're going to start our first set, which we always have to do at the beginning of the book because it's such a good comprehension skill to have. Predictions. Looking at the front cover, what do you think the book is going to be about? Okay, so it's going to be a little shaky today because I'm still getting used to how to do this. So I've got the book here. I'm going to show you guys the cover. So right away, I can tell that this is probably going to have something to do with some snow dogs. So the dogs that maybe pull sleds. It's obviously a really good book. It's got a 30th anniversary. And I love this. John Reynolds Gardner is the author. And John Reynolds is actually the name of my great-grandfather. So I'm already getting some good vibes from this. Very good. So it's got to be somewhere cold because there's a lot of snow. And snow dogs usually live in cold places. So, and maybe something about fox. Maybe there's something about animals in here too. More animals than dogs. I'm going to lift this back up. I'm going to put this book to the side. And we've got our next comprehension skill. But I want you to pause and write down 3 predictions you have for this book. They can be quick. Just pause and do it now. All right, turn me back on when you're ready. We're going to talk about author study a little bit because this is an activity you're going to do today once we're done here. Author study. An author study is a unit lesson that gives students the opportunity to dig deeply into an author's life and body of work. So I took a picture of an author study that I did with younger kids a couple months ago. We read a story around Valentine's Day. The author was Patricia Polacco, and I love Patricia Polacco. So this is a poster I had made for the class. So that's a picture of Patricia, obviously. And what I did was the author study is finding different facts about the author. And up in the corner you can see an author study is a study about the stories written by the author. So we're going to obviously be doing an author study on John Reynolds Gardner. So we're going to also be talking about his book and how it relates to him. But here was just the first part where I wrote some facts about the author. So grew up poor. Sorry, this is kind of hard to see because it was taking pictures of. She was diagnosed with dyslexia. She was born in Lansing, Michigan in 1990. It's really close. I can't see it. 1944. Her parents were divorced. Didn't learn to read until 14 years old. #1 children's book when she was only 41 years old, which is really, really cool and really, really crazy. So today you're going to kind of dig deeper into our author, John Reynolds Gardner, and find some facts for me about him. Okay, sorry, I'm getting used to doing it this way. And let's get some vocabulary in. So our vocabulary for today, we've got 6 words. So we're going to go through each of them, and then I'll let you pause and write down the definitions. Irrigation. Irrigation is a system to bring water in. So many small towns have to have an irrigation system where the water pumps from somewhere else and then gets brought into their city, and then they filter it and make it clean and all that stuff. So it's something really, really interesting if you want to look that up and more into that. Small towns have it. I'm sure our town probably has a system for sure. Next word is preceded. and that means to move forward. So when you proceed, you're continuing on, you're moving forward. You proceed in line. Determined, decided, resolved. So when someone's determined to do something, they're going to do it. They have decided, they're not changing their minds, they're set on doing it. Next word is concerned, worried about something or someone. Okay, well, I'm concerned about you guys all the time. That's something I'm used to. Inspected, carefully examined. So when you inspect something, you have to really make sure you look at all the details. Detectives have to inspect very carefully. And the last word is mended, and that's just another word for repaired. So if you ever got like a rip in your clothing or any kind of tear in your pants or maybe in your jumpers and the zipper comes off, somebody can mend it for you. They can repair it for you. Maybe it's your mom, maybe it's grandma, maybe it's dad. I don't know who does it, but I actually learned how to mend clothing. So that was something in quarantine I wanted to learn about. So go ahead and pause and get those all written down. Turn me back on when you're ready, because I am going to continue. So I'm going to go ahead and put you back on my normal spot. Very good. So it's time to start reading. Wait, why is this phone today? Okay. So it's time to start reading. That's super exciting. So I've got my mirror in the way. I've got my book, my Stone Fox book, and I'm gonna open up. Okay, so the first page there says, "There's got to be another way." As little Willie walked out of the bank with his head down, Searchlight greeted him by placing two muddy paws on his chest. Oh, so Searchlight must be a dog. Little Willie smiled and grabbed Searchlight around the neck and squeezed her as hard as he could. "We'll do it, girl. You and me. We'll find a way." The next day, Little Willie talked to everybody he could think of. He talked with his teacher, Miss Williams. He talked with Lester at the general store. He even talked with Hank, who swept up over at the post office. They all agreed, sell the farm. That was the only answer. Oh my goodness. So that was a little clue, and maybe that could help with your predictions a little bit. So it says there's only one answer. Sell the farm. I wonder why he has to sell his farm. And I wonder why he's in charge of that. I wonder, because his name is Little Willie, so Little makes me think he's kind of younger. Oh wow, we got a great illustration on the front of our page, the first page. A boy and his dog. Gotta love it. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1, Grandfather. One day, Grandfather wouldn't get out of bed. He just lay there and stared at the ceiling and looked sad. At first, Little Willie thought he was playing. Little Willie lived with his grandfather on a small potato farm in Wyoming. We know our setting, we know a clue. It was hard work living on a potato farm, but it was also a lot of fun, especially when Grandfather felt like playing. Like the time Grandfather dressed up as the scarecrow out in the garden. It took Little Willie an hour to catch on. Boy, did he laugh. Grandfather laughed so hard he cried. And when he cried, his beard filled up with tears. Grandfather always got up real early in the morning. So early that it was still dark outside. He would make a fire. Then he would make breakfast and call Little Willie. "Hurry up or you'll be eaten with the chickens," he would say. Then he would throw his head back and laugh. Once Little Willie went back to sleep. When he woke up, he found his plate out in the chicken coop. It was picked clean. He never slept late again after that. Oh, can you imagine if you guys all slept late and instead of your parents giving you breakfast when you wake up, they put your plate in the chicken coop and the chickens eat it? Oh, farm life must be completely different from us in city life. All right. That is until this morning. For some reason, Grandfather had forgotten to call him. That's when Little Willie discovered that Grandfather was still in bed. There could be only one explanation. Grandfather was playing. It was another trick. Or was it? "Get up, Grandfather," Little Willie said. "I don't want to play anymore." But Grandfather didn't answer. Little Willie ran out of the house. A dog was sleeping on the front porch. "Come on, Searchlight," Little Willie cried out. The dog jumped to its feet and they ran off down the road, Searchlight was a big black dog. He had a white spot on his forehead the size of a silver dollar. He was an old dog, actually born on the same day as little Willie, which was over 10 years ago. A mile down the road, they came to a small log cabin surrounded by tall trees. Doc Smith was sitting in a rocking chair under one of the trees reading a book. So we're going to pause right here and think about this. Little Willie's grandfather isn't answering, so he ran to go get the doctor. He must be a very smart kid. I wonder what's going on. Doc Smith, little Willie called out. He was out of breath. Come quick. What seems to be the matter, Willie? The doctor asked, continuing to read. Doc Smith had snow white hair and wore a long black dress. Her skin was tan and her face was covered with wrinkles. So we've met 3 characters and they've given a really good description of the doc. So we've met little Willie, we've met Grandpa. Oh, we've met 4 characters. We've met Searchlight and then Doc Smith. So Doc Smith is also a girl. Grandfather won't answer me, little Willie said. Probably just another trick, Doc Smith replied. Nothing to worry about. But he's still in bed. Doc Smith turned a page and continued to read. How late did you 2 stay up last night? We went to bed early, real early. No singing or music or anything. Doc Smith stopped reading. Your grandfather went to bed without playing his harmonica, she asked. Little Willie nodded. Doc Smith shut her book and stood up. Hitch up Rex for me, Willie, she said. I'll get my bag. Rex was Doc Smith's horse. He was a handsome Palomino. Ooh, Palomino. I wonder what kind of horse that is. You guys will have to look that one up. Little Willie hitched Rex to the wagon, and then they rode back to Grandfather's farm. Searchlight ran on ahead, leading the way and barking. Searchlight enjoyed a good run. Grandfather was just the same. He hadn't moved. Searchlight put her big front paws up on the bed and rested her head on Grandfather's chest. She licked his beard, which was full of tears. Doc Smith proceeded to examine Grandfather. She used just about everything in her little black bag. What's that for? Little Willie asked. What are you doing now? Must you ask so many questions? Doc Smith said. Grandfather says it's good to ask questions. Doc Smith pulled a long silver object from her doctor's bag. What's that for? Little Willie asked. Hush. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. When Doc Smith had finished her examination, she put everything back into her little black bag. Then she walked over to the window and looked out at the field of potatoes. After a moment, she asked, How's the crop this year, Willie? Grandfather says it's the best ever. Doc Smith rubbed her wrinkled face. What's wrong with him? Little Willie asked. Do you owe anybody money? She asked. No, Little Willie answered. What's wrong? Why won't you tell me what's wrong? That's just it, she said. There is nothing wrong with him. You mean he's not sick? Medically, he's as healthy as an ox. Could live to be 100 if he wanted to. I don't understand, Little Willie said. Doc Smith took a deep breath, and then she began. It happens when a person gives up on life. For whatever reason, starts up here in the mind first. Then it spreads to the body. It's a real sickness, all right, and there's no cure except in the person's own mind. I'm sorry, child, but it fears that your grandfather just doesn't want to live anymore. Little Willie was silent for a long time before he spoke. But what about fishing and the rodeo and turkey dinners? Doesn't he want to do those things anymore? Grandfather shut his eyes and tears rolled down his cheeks and disappeared into his beard. I'm sure he does, Doc Smith said, putting her arm around Little Willie. It must be something else. Little Willie stared at the floor. I'll find out. I'll find out what's wrong and make it better. You'll see, I'll make Grandfather want to live again. And Searchlight barked loudly. Whoa, okay, what a crazy introduction we have here. So we've met some characters, we talked about them, and then we gotta find out what's wrong with his grandfather. Why he's not moving or not speaking or he's crying, he's super upset. We have to figure that out. And this little Willie, who, by the way, is 10 years old, and he's living with his grandfather. He works on a potato farm. He knew how to hitch up a horse, if anyone ever listened to that. For being 10, he can do a lot of really cool things. He must have learned a lot from his grandfather. And he talked about things like fishing and music. His grandfather obviously loves music. He plays the harmonica. We've learned so much in this chapter. So for chapter 2, let's learn a little bit more about Little Willie. Little Willie. A 10-year-old boy cannot run a farm, but you can't tell a 10-year-old boy that, especially a boy like Little Willie. Grandfather grew potatoes, and that's exactly what Little Willie was going to do. The harvest was just weeks away, and Little Willie was sure that if the crop was a good one, Grandfather would get well. Hadn't Grandfather been overly concerned about the crop this year? Hadn't he insisted that every square inch of the land be planted? Hadn't he gotten up in the middle of the night to check the irrigation? Oh, so the water system is how they feed all their crops. Gonna be our best ever, Willie, he had said. And he had said it over and over again. Yes, after the harvest, everything would be all right. Little Willie was sure of it. But Doc Smith wasn't. He's getting worse, she said 3 weeks later. It's best to face these things, Willie. Your grandfather is going to die. He'll get better, you'll see. Wait till after the harvest. Doc Smith shook her head. I think you should consider letting Mrs. Peacock in town take care of him, like she does those other sickly folks. He'll be in good hands until the end comes. Doc Smith stepped up into the wagon. You can come live with me until we make plans. She looked at Searchlight. I'm sure there's a farmer in these parts who needs a good working dog. Searchlight growled, causing Doc Smith's horse, Rex, to pull the wagon forward a few feet. Believe me, Willie, it's better this way. No, shouted Little Willie. We're a family. Why, don't you see? We gotta stick together. Searchlight barked loudly, causing the horse to rear up on his hind legs and then take off running. Doc Smith jammed her foot on the brake, but it didn't do any good. The wagon disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust. Little Willie and Searchlight looked at each other, and then Little Willie broke out laughing. Searchlight joined him by barking again. Little Willie knelt down, took Searchlight by the ears, and looked directly into her eyes. She had the greenest eyes you've ever seen. I won't ever give you away, ever, I promise. He put his arms around the dog's strong neck and held her tightly. I love you, Searchlight. And Searchlight understood, for she had heard those words many times before. That evening, Little Willie made a discovery. He was sitting at the foot of Grandfather's bed, playing the harmonica. He wasn't as good as Grandfather by a long shot, and whenever he missed a note, Searchlight would put her head back and howl. Once, when Little Willie was way off key, Searchlight actually grabbed the harmonica in her mouth and ran out of the room with it. Do you want me to play some more, Little Willie? Asked Grandfather, knowing very well that Grandfather would not answer. Grandfather had not talked, not one word, for over 3 weeks. But something happened that was almost like talking. Grandfather put his hand down on the bed with his palm facing upward. Little Willie looked at the hand for a long time, then asked in a whisper, Does that mean yes? Grandfather closed his hand slowly and then opened it again. Little Willie rushed to the side of the bed. His eyes were wild with excitement. What's the sign for no? Grandfather turned his hand over and laid the flat on the bed. Palm down meant no. Palm up meant yes. Before the night was over, they had worked out other signals in their hand and finger code. 1 finger meant I'm hungry, 2 fingers meant water, but most of the time Little Willie just asked questions that Grandfather could either answer yes or no. And Searchlight seemed to know what was going on, for she would lick Grandfather's hand every time he made a sign. The next day, Little Willie began to prepare for the harvest. There was a lot of work to be done. The underground shed where the potatoes would be stored until they could be sold had to be cleaned. The potato sacks had to be inspected and mended if need be. The plow had to be sharpened, but most important, because Grandfather's old mare had died last winter, a horse to pull the plow had to be located and rented. It was going to be difficult to find a horse, because most farmers were not interested in overworking their animals for any price. Grandfather kept his money in a strong box under the boards in the corner of his bedroom. Little Willie got the box out and opened it. It was empty. For some letters that Little Willie didn't bother, except for some letters, that Little Willie didn't bother to read. There was no money to rent a horse. No money for anything else for that matter. Little Willie had had no idea they were broke. Everything they had needed since grandfather took sick, little Willie had gotten at Lester's General Store on a credit against this year's crop. No wonder grandfather was so concerned. No wonder he had gotten sick. Little Willie had to think of something, and quick. It was now the middle of September. The potatoes they had planted in early June took from 90 to 120 days to mature, which meant they must be harvested soon. Besides, the longer he waited, the more danger there was that any early freeze would destroy the crop. And little Willie was sure that if the crop died, grandfather would die too. A friend of grandfather's offered to help, but little Willie said no. Don't accept help unless you can pay for it, grandfather had always said, especially from friends. And then little Willie remembered something. His college money. He had enough to rent a horse, pay for help, everything. He told grandfather about his plan, but grandfather signaled no. Little Willie pleaded with him, but grandfather just repeated, no, no, no. The situation appeared hopeless, but little Willie was determined. He would dig up the potatoes by hand if he had to, and then Searchlight solved the problem. She walked over and stood in front of the plow. In her mouth was the harness she wore during the winter when she pulled the snow sled. Little Willie shook his head. Digging up a field is not the same as riding over snow, he told her, but Searchlight just stood there and would not move. You don't have the strength, girl. Little Willie tried to talk her out of it, but Searchlight had made up her mind. The potato plant grows about 2 feet high, but there are no potatoes on it. The potatoes are all underground. The plow digs up the plants and churns the potatoes to the surface, where they can be picked up and put into sacks. It took little Willie and Searchlight over 10 days to complete the harvest, but they made it. Either the dirt was softer than little Willie had thought, or Searchlight was stronger because she actually seemed to enjoy herself. And the harvest was a big one, close to 200 bushels per acre, and each bushel weighed about 26 pounds. Little Willie inspected the potatoes, threw out the bad ones, and put the rest into sacks. He then put the sacks into the underground shed. Mr. Leeks, a tall man with a thin face, riding a horse that was also tall and had a thin face, came out to the farm and bought the potatoes. Last year, grandfather had sold the crop to Mr. Leeks, so that's what little Willie did this year. We made it, grandfather, little Willie said, as tears of happiness rolled down his cheeks. See? Little Willie held up 2 handfuls of money. You can stop worrying. You can get better now. Grandfather put his hand down on the bed. Palm meant no. It was not the crop he'd been worried about. It was something else. Little Willie had been wrong all along. Oh boy, so that's where we're going to stop for today. What an interesting start to the story. So we already jump in and super dramatic already. Stuff is happening. Bad things are happening. We've got poor little Willie, a 10-year-old boy, taking care of a farm all by himself. And he's got a trusty dog to help him. Could you guys imagine that? Being on your own and having to take care. He knew how to plow. He knew how to plant. He knew how to mend the sacks that they put the potatoes into. He knew how to do everything at only 10 years old. That's so amazing. So for today, you guys have your vocabulary activity. You have an activity on the 2 chapters we read, but you're also going to do a little bit of an author study. So let's talk about that for a little bit. When you're doing this author study, you can use Google. That's totally fine. Maybe you'll find something in the book. Oh, maybe if you have the book, there's a page on the back of the book. I'll also post that if need. Or if you want it, you can email me and I'll send you a picture. How about that? Because I don't want to make another worksheet or if it's a waste of time. So use Google. And I would just put in there and say John Reynolds Gardner, author, just put John Reynolds Gardner, biography. Because remember, a biography is a book about his life, or maybe a website about his life. But maybe also in your search bar, add for kids. So the text you're getting isn't too complex and hard to read. It's something that's on your level and able to read. All right, so can't wait to hear from you guys. Make sure you get all 3 of those activities turned into Flipgrid. by Tuesday at the most. I won't say they're due on Monday. I'm assigning it on Monday, and you could turn it in Tuesday on Flipgrid if need be, or by the end of the week. No big deal. All right, great first day. See you Wednesday, or see you tomorrow, Tuesday, for book talk.